Can inflation increase your debt without you even realizing it? Inflation, it's a term we've all heard before, but do we truly understand how it affects our finances? We all know that the price of things like groceries, gas, and rent tends to go up over time. But what many don't realize is that inflation doesn't just affect what we pay for goods and services, it can also have a massive impact on personal debt. That's right, your debt, whether it's a mortgage, credit card balance, or student loan, could be getting more expensive without you even knowing it. You may be thinking, but I'm not taking on new debt, I'm sticking to my repayment plan. Well, inflation doesn't care about your repayment plan. It creeps into your finances in ways you might not expect. In this video, we'll break down exactly how inflation affects your personal debt, why it's more than just a nuisance, and how you can protect yourself from rising costs while managing your debts. So, if you've ever felt like you're working harder to make ends meet, this video is for you. Before we dive into how inflation impacts debt, let's quickly define what inflation is. At its core, inflation refers to the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises, leading to a decrease in the purchasing power of money. In simpler terms, your dollars are worth less as prices go up. So, when you used to pay $3 for a loaf of bread, it might cost you $4 today, without you earning any extra money to cover that increase. But here's where things get tricky. Inflation doesn't just affect your spending, it also impacts your borrowing and repaying of debt. Have you noticed certain items in your shopping cart costing more recently? How has inflation affected your everyday expenses? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's talk about how inflation directly impacts different types of personal debt. First up, we'll look at fixed-rate debt. That's debt with a set interest rate, like a mortgage or personal loan. In a high-inflation environment, your fixed-rate debt can actually work in your favor, at least on the surface. Here's why. When inflation is high, the real value of the money you owe decreases. Let's say you took out a loan or mortgage for $100,000 with a fixed interest rate. Over time, as inflation pushes up the general price level, the money you owe becomes less valuable in real terms. Essentially, you're paying off your debt with cheaper dollars. For example, if inflation is running at 5% per year and your debt repayment stays the same, the real cost of your debt is effectively lower. This can feel like a bit of a win because the value of what you owe is shrinking, even though you're making the same payments. Have you noticed a difference in how your fixed-rate loan feels over time with inflation? Do you think it's a good thing or not? Drop your thoughts below. On the flip side, if you need to take out new loans or borrow money in an inflationary environment, interest rates are likely to rise. Central banks typically raise interest rates to fight inflation, meaning any new debt you take on could be more expensive. This applies to credit cards, car loans, and even mortgages. If you're already dealing with a fixed-rate loan, you might feel relieved that your rate isn't increasing, but new borrowers or those looking to refinance might find themselves paying much more in interest than they would have during a low inflation period. Now, let's shift our focus to variable rate debt, which includes things like credit cards, home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, and some types of student loans. For these types of debt, inflation is usually a bad thing. If you have debt with a variable interest rate, inflation means that your payments are likely going up. Central banks often raise rates to combat inflation, and as rates rise, so do the interest rates on your credit cards, lines of credit, and other variable rate loans. For example, let's say you owe $10,000 on a credit card with a variable interest rate of 15%. If inflation drives rates up by just 1 to 2%, your credit card interest rate could rise, and suddenly your monthly payment increases. This could make it harder to pay off the debt and lead to more interest accumulation. If you carry a balance on a credit card, you might have already felt the sting of rising interest rates. For many people, credit card debt is one of the most expensive forms of borrowing, and inflation just adds fuel to the fire. Rising rates mean your balances will accrue interest faster, making it harder to get out of debt. Do you have any variable rate debt, like credit cards or loans? How has inflation affected your ability to make payments? Let's talk about it in the comments. It's not just about the cost of debt, it's also about your ability to repay that debt in the first place. When inflation increases, the purchasing power of your income decreases. In simple terms, as prices rise, your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as it used to. This means you have less money to spend on essentials and less money to put toward paying off your debts. For example, if your salary stays the same but inflation drives up the cost of food and gas, you might find yourself with less disposable income to make your debt payments. This can create a domino effect where you miss payments, accumulate late fees, and fall further into debt. Inflation can also make it harder to get out of debt. If you're barely managing to make minimum payments on your debt, rising living costs may force you to rely more on credit cards, loans, or BNPL services to get by. This can trap you in a vicious cycle of borrowing more to cover the rising cost of living, all while struggling to pay off existing debt. Now that we understand the risks inflation poses to our debt, what can we do to protect ourselves? If you're paying off a mortgage or a student loan and you have a fixed-rate loan, consider refinancing if it makes sense for you. While inflation may make borrowing more expensive in general, refinancing at a lower rate could help you save money and lock in a low interest rate for the future. If you have credit card debt or other high-interest variable rate loans, it's crucial to tackle those first. Inflation-driven interest rate hikes can increase the cost of carrying those balances, so paying them off faster can help you avoid accruing excessive interest. Reevaluate your budget regularly to account for rising costs due to inflation. By tracking your spending and adjusting your budget accordingly, you can ensure that you're putting enough money toward debt repayment while still covering your essential expenses. If you're struggling to keep up with rising prices and debt payments, consider finding ways to increase your income. Whether it's through a side hustle, freelancing, or negotiating a raise at work, finding additional streams of income can help you stay ahead of rising costs and debt. The reality is that inflation is a part of life, and its impact on your personal debt is something you can't ignore. While inflation can decrease the real value of your fixed-rate debt, it also makes variable-rate debt more expensive and can erode your ability to repay what you owe. To stay on top of your finances during inflationary periods, be proactive in managing your debt, adjusting your budget, and looking for ways to increase your income. By doing so, you'll be better equipped to handle the challenges inflation throws at you while still staying on track with your debt repayment goals. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Rise Above Debt for more tips and strategies on navigating the challenges of personal debt and achieving financial freedom. See you next time, and remember, taking control of your finances today ensures a better tomorrow.